Okay, well, here we are. We've got some people joining our webinar here, our very first webinar from the Merchants House Museum here on 29 East 4th Street in New York City. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. It's our very first show tonight, and we really appreciate your support and logging in and listening to my colleague here, Dr. Lee, and I discuss our investigations that we're performing here at the Merchants House Museum. So I'd like to introduce us. My name is Dan Sturgis. And I'd like to introduce the very enigmatic Dr. Lee. Lee, I want you to say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, that's Lee. Should we even say that due to Lee's job and his professional life, Lee has decided to stay off camera for the time being. So you guys are missing out. Lee's a very handsome young man, and we appreciate your patience. I know we're a little late starting today. So we got 32 people in the joining us tonight. So if you guys have any questions, I'm going to open up the chat room. Hello from Queens. I'll be able to keep an eye if anybody's got any questions for us. And I'll try and answer them as best as I can. So I guess to begin with, we want to just tell us a little bit about each other and what we've been doing here at the Merchants House. We're going to be doing this show every month, the third week of every month. Each month we'll have a different topic that we'll be talking about, something to do with the paranormal and how it relates to the Merchants House here. And Dr. Lee, being a scientist, Lee will be able to discuss the science behind some of the stuff that we're doing here at the Merchants House. So hopefully in the future, if you guys really like this show, you'll be able to log in and learn a little bit and hopefully help us move forward in our investigation. So I guess we'll get going here. Lee, what do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So how you doing way over there? You doing all right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. We'd like to, first off, happy Earth Day to everybody. It's a chilly day here down in New York City. We'd like to just talk the beginnings, in the beginning. The Merchants House here was built in 1832. The Treadwells moved in 1835. And Gertrude, who was the youngest daughter and the only child that was born in the house, the only member of the family that was born in the house, she was born in 1840 and lived in the house to the ripe old age of 93, dying in 1933, right in the room right above where we're sitting. We're sitting in the front parlor of the Merchants House. Only one family lived here. And after Gertrude had passed away, they locked the doors up. A few years later, it opened up as a museum of 19th century living. Now, during the construction phase and bringing everything up to code to be able to open it up as a public space, a lot of the workers were having experiences and having phenomena happening around them, and they started writing some of the things that they were experiencing down. So we've got a pretty good diary of paranormal phenomena happening here at the Merchants House. Now, phenomena has been happening since the doors opened as a museum in 1936. It's been happening continuously. We do have everything written down and documented, so we're able to cross-reference a lot of the phenomena that people are experiencing. And it turns out people are experiencing similar phenomena. We'll have somebody from the 1960s report seeing a young woman walk down the stairs in a brown dress holding a cup of tea and walking into the kitchen. And somebody might have that same experience in the 2000s. So separated by decades and not attached to each other in any way. And that's just an amazing thing to have as an investigator. And I'm guessing as a scientist, if you have a pedigree or provenance for the phenomena, that's got to be a step in the right direction and less of a headache as far as an investigation goes.
Yeah, absolutely. It just makes, before you sort of start formalizing experiments and really going forward with the investigation, you want to just have some confidence that, what you're looking into isn't going to be a total waste of time. So yeah, the more existing history, regardless of whether it was scientifically collected or whatever, or anecdotally, it doesn't matter. Like basically the more evidence there is, the better.
Right. Yeah, so people have been reporting phenomena here, like we said, since 1936. The museum is running as a big public space. We've got people coming through all the time. During the pandemic, things slowed down quite a bit, but we're getting back into the swing of things. Now, the experiences that people have been having here, they really run the gamut of paranormal phenomena. People have seen full-bodied apparitions. People have interacted with apparitions and actually, provided information back and forth. People haven't known that they were speaking to an apparition. Somebody might come down from taking a self-guided tour upstairs and speak to a museum worker saying, the docent in period clothing upstairs was fantastic. And as it turns out, the Merchants House docents don't wear period clothing. So the museum staff will pull out a picture of the Treadwell family and ask the person to point to anyone that looks familiar. And more often than not, they will point to somebody in the picture. So it seems that somebody was having an experience with a member of the Treadwell family upstairs, which is, if that happens to you, you're a member of a very exclusive club and a club that I don't necessarily belong to. So all this has been happening at the Merchants House. Over the course of years, there have been many investigations. Merchants House has been on TV. They've lots of news programs here at the Merchants House. It's a notoriously haunted location in the United States, if not the world. I have friends over in England who are aware of the Merchants House and follow what we do here pretty closely. We've got the Rhine Research Center, who has talked about the Merchants House in some of their lectures. They are a great research center down in North Carolina, and you should really check them out. They've got some amazing stuff going on. So the Merchants House is a real popular place, and it's a gold mine for researchers and investigators like Lee and myself. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be able to come in here and perform these experiments and poke our way through the house in the middle of the night. I don't know a lot of real accredited musicians that give investigators like Lee and I the opportunity to do that. So we really, hats off to the museum board, Anthony Belov, Emily Wright, and Bob Gardner, the director, who has graciously given us the opportunity to come in here and enjoy and just be part of the family here. So much thanks to them. Let's talk about how we got started here. I have written a letter to all of the historic locations here in New York City. I was working with paranormal group, Paranormal NYC, for a few years and decided to kind of branch off on my own and explore historic locations. I got a few emails back from the ones that I sent out, but the one that I was really hoping for was the Merchants House. And sure enough, I've got an email back from Anthony Bello, the board member, and I just got very lucky. My email landed on the desk at the right time, and people were in a good mood and decided, let's get a hold of this Sturgis guy. And the last experience they had with paranormal investigators here at the house wasn't a positive one. So they had decided to just sort of lock the door to investigators and just carry on as a museum. So I'm fortunate that my email landed in the hands of the right person at the right time. And as a result, I jumped through lots and lots of hoops and bought Anthony lots and lots of lunches and finally was given the green light to come in and perform some investigations. One of the first investigations we did was a seance right here in the parlors, where I brought in a psychic medium named Richard Schoeller, who just really changed my mind and the minds of a lot of people that were here, changed our minds regarding psychic mediums. I didn't believe in them. I thought they were a bunch of hooey, and Richard really changed my mind and was able to to tap into the house and make contact with members of the family. Seabury right up here. He spoke with Seabury and members of the staff that were here. He actually got names of the staff and years that they were working here, towns that they came from in Ireland. And he's got so much information that we didn't actually even know that. We had to go to the New York Historical Society and look in their census records to be able to confirm what Richard had told us. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know if it was uptown, downtown, east side, west side of New York City. So he really came in here blind. And now that was 13, almost 14 years ago. And I've been investigating the house since. Their in-house paranormal investigator. I've been fortunate enough to have the museum only allow me to investigate the house. So, you know, we cut into to about 13 years into the investigation. I get an email from the house saying, hey, we have an email from a doctor and his name is Lee, and we'd like for you to talk to him. He seems to have some interesting ideas about what might be going on here. And I think that's how you and I got connected. Yeah. Lee, is that right? How'd that all come about?
Yeah. So I started doing some research into scientific literature that existed, both on, you know, ghost phenomena in terms of that's how they describe it in the papers, and also just related existing things in science in terms of hallucinations, things like that, that people may not specifically, you know, obviously call ghosts. Like, you know, if it's a psychological journal, they're calling it a hallucination. But I found some interesting correlations between that type of research and other types of research, and sort of came up with some hypotheses that for the time being seem to have not been come out to be true, but they've led to some other interesting routes. So. Yeah.
Lee, I got a question here from somebody who wants to know what kind of doctor you are, what's your background?
My background's in neuroscience. So in a neuroscience program, you learn a lot of different skills. It's very multidisciplinary. So I learned electronics along with, you know, learning science. I learned how to do culturing of cells, surgeries. Yeah, it sort of like brings a lot of things together, and it really kind of lets you be open to a lot of different problems. And also, because neuroscience is still, there's a ton to be learned. It's the same kind of atmosphere in terms of you can come up with all kinds of crazy theories and test them out. And, you know, you really have to think about how to approach sort of vague problems, you know, like this one.
Right. Now, I mean, a lot of people doing paranormal investigations, they throw around the term, you know, the scientific method.
Yeah.
And as far as, you know, I don't have a background in science. I have a background in theater. And the scientific method, is that applicable to a paranormal investigation?
Yeah, it absolutely can be. And that's the thing. You can actually see. It's a little hard to explain if you don't have a scientific background. You know, I remember before I sort of had my scientific education, it's just sort of a different mindset once you sort of understand these methods and why they're important. And it's sort of hard to understand that before you've gone through that sort of rigor. And so you can sort of see, even in a lot of these ghost hunting shows and ghost hunters, et cetera, there's a decent amount of frustration, right? Like they collect some data and then still nobody believes them, right? And they don't necessarily understand why. And a lot of that comes down to just the way in which they collect that data, you know, the methodologies. So there's a lot of, there's like the official scientific method, which is definitely, that's sort of the gold standard. And then in reality, science sort of builds up to that, right? So you sort of start with a hunch and you kind of throw together an experiment and you kind of get some little bit of encouraging data. Then you formalize a little bit more, formalize a little bit more, with the ultimate goal of kind of having a very formal, you know, quote unquote, perfect scientific method where there's a lot of replications and stuff. Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of officialness to what the appropriate scientific method is, but a majority of science at least starts off not doing it that way and sort of building up to that over time.
Right. And why do you think, you know, it's frustrating, you know, for a lot of the parapsychologists out there, and parapsychology is considered a fringe science or a pseudoscience. And why do you think that mainstream science hasn't embraced parapsychology? yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the problems, and it's a problem with other things in sort of more of the mainstream science too, is the lack of the way in which these, so ghost hunters, et cetera, and parapsychologists, they record phenomena, but there is no good established theory about how that phenomena could happen according to existing laws of physics, et cetera. So there's other areas of science where yet they have that same problem, right? So for instance, the person that first discovered that a certain type of gas, nitrogen oxide, I believe, can change the dilation of blood vessels. They didn't know why, they just kind of discovered, oh, cool, like this happens, right? It was an accidental discovery, actually. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure about the actual history, but if you essentially say that if they tried to publish a paper on that, it probably would have been rejected, even though it had all this data showing, hey, this happens, because people want to see, how, why, go more into the mechanism. So if you don't have a mechanism or a good hypothesis of what that mechanism might be, a lot of times it's thrown out, and that's partially what's missing. And without that mechanism, you really kind of have to make up for that with just a much larger amount of data proving that this event exists without the knowledge of how it might be happening. Right. So it becomes hard to prove.
And it has to be repeatable too. It has
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So and repeatable a lot more than it would be if you did have a hypothesis for a kind of mechanism for how that could be happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it becomes even harder.
Yeah, I know. There's a great story that happened down in the Rhine where they had a kid, a college student, using the Zener cards, and I think he went on a run of well over 100 matches, and they brought him in the next day to do it again, and he couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
And it turns out that his girlfriend had broken up with him the night before, and he just wasn't in a good state of mind. And but it's hard. It's got to be frustrating for parapsychologists to have this run of what are the chances of getting 175 right in a row? Yeah. And because you can't do it the next day, it's all that gets thrown out.
Yeah, and there's like a term for that within parapsychology. What is it called? Like the decline effect or something? Yeah. Like a general, word kind of.
Yeah.
So, and the way that they've been trying to get around that, including in parapsychology, is, for instance, in setting up very formalized experiments where there's basically like a mechanism that's automating the whole experiment. So it's anytime you have an experimenter involved. So for those experiments, for instance, they probably had somebody visually observing and being like, oh, they got that one right, they got this one wrong, and maybe they were even presenting the cards. So that's one thing that, like I mentioned before, that you don't really recognize, and it's hard to really fully understand the importance of before you get a scientific education, which is the influence of the experimenter, or any humans, any living thing, honestly, in the room at the same place that the experiment's happening, is an extra million variables, right? Maybe the experimenter was having a bad day. Maybe they were tired and they didn't realize they showed the card wrong, right? Even if they didn't do any of those mistakes, the problem is all other scientists looking at this, because there's no mechanism and because it's such a crazy thing, they're going to say, easiest assumption is that that's what happened, right? One of these variables that the person wasn't necessarily even trying to lie. They just kind of made these little errors or maybe little influences on the experiment. So it always just be attributed to that until there's no mechanism, or until that kind of thing is replicated on a bunch of different studies. Yeah.
Interesting. Hey, what got you into this specifically? Why'd you reach out to the Merchant's House? And have you ever had an experience? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
No, I haven't actually. I've never had a quote unquote paranormal experience, but I've had very close friends and family that have. So that's, again, it's all those things that convinced me enough that these phenomena might be real, that it's made me feel, okay, this is worth my time. I want to look into this, right? So that's really all you need to get started on these experiments. And then just like at the Merchant House, we started off with very sort of informal testing experiments, but they keep, interesting data keeps coming up. So we've just continued to, increase the thoroughness and the, how well the experiments are conducted to just get better and better data.
Right. And, since I started here at the Merchant's House, and I have brought in lots of people, I have brought in lots of psychic mediums, I've brought in people claiming to be scientists and doctors of this and that. And, it hasn't really been a positive experience bringing these people in for me. It seems like they wanted to more just come in for the thrill, or maybe see or hear something that happens. And you know, the data that I've been collecting, it's mostly been EVP, or electronic voice phenomena, which we're going to talk about next month, and we'll we'll play a lot of EVP that we captured here. I'll play some tonight. But you know, what I feel that I've been missing, and I probably didn't even know I was missing it until you and I hooked up, was that real sort of acknowledgement that what we're doing here has some significance in science. You know, you watch these ghost shows and you watch these movies, and you know, you catch an EVP, or you see a shadow figure, you know, something, and that's cool. It's really, really cool. But to have a scientist go, yeah, you know, I don't know how that happened or why that would happen, and I really want to figure this out, it really has put a new life into the investigations here at the Merchant's House. You know, for years I've been collecting EVP and collecting data off of electronic or EMF meters, electromagnetic field meters. I'm going to play a clip. I'm going to share my my screen for a moment and play something. I'm going to play an audio clip. We've got an electromagnetic field, a tri-field natural electromagnetic field, which measures fluctuations in the natural electromagnetic field.
Yeah, specifically static electric fields, which are not, or in other words, like DC current essentially, or you know, a static. So all electricity in the walls, etc., that's all fluctuating AC alternating current. So this, you know, is less affected by that, which is the important part.
Right. So it's measuring like a geomagnetic field. It can measure a thunderstorm going past, and it like I said, it measures the fluctuation. It doesn't give you the intensity of the field. It just measures the fluctuation of the field. So and it measures, it gives it off an audible kind of buzzing noise. So I'm gonna share my screen for a moment, and there we go, share, and I'm gonna play this clip right here. All right, I'm just gonna ask you one more thing. If you are in this room, and I think we all have a feeling you might be, there's a little blue box sitting on the windowsill over in the corner of the room. If you approach that little blue box and wave your hand over it, or touch that blue box, it'll buzz, and we'll know that you're here. So if you could just go over and just touch that little blue box, or wave your hand over it 3 times right in a row, that would be amazing, and we'd really appreciate it. So, all right, I'll shut up now. That was great. Thank you very much. Wow. You know what? Can you touch it one more time? Really, really quick. Just touch it. Just tap it once. Thank you very much. Wow, that's good. Yeah, that's a cool clip, and I enjoy listening to that for a lot of different reasons.
And you said that was actually recorded like 10 feet away, right?
Yeah, that was recorded in the rear parlor. We're in the front parlor at the Merchant's House, and I had that little blue box sitting on a windowsill in the I guess it would be the northwest window of the Merchant's House here, and it was late at night. I was with my friend Garrett, who has since passed away. So I love listening to that because it's a really cool clip, and I can hear Garrett laughing, and brings back some happy memories. But you know, for me, you know, this was well over 10 years ago, and for me, it was I've almost taken that for granted that I have this clip and that I caught that, and you know, I'm not sure. That's not evidence of a ghost. That's evidence of a fluctuating electromagnetic field. Is that some kind of intentional PK coming from Garrett and I wanting that meter to go off so bad that we created some kind of fluctuation to cause that meter to go off? I don't know. Whatever the case, it's really, really cool. But but it turns out it's one of Lee's favorite clips that I've caught here, and he has an interesting reason why it's cool. So Lee, lay it on.
Yeah, I mean, partially it's along the lines of what I was saying before in terms of that sensor is not as sensitive.
Lee, I don't mean to interrupt you, but somebody has a question. PK, yeah. I'm sorry, PK. I'm talking about psychokinesis, which is mind over matter. It's the energy of our mind interacting with the physical world. So I apologize for that. But PK is psychokinesis, and Lee, I apologize for interrupting.
But yeah, like you were saying, it's not a traditional EMF meter, which is responsive to alternating currents. So all the electricity that's coming to your sockets and your walls, it's all alternating current. So it's basically a sine wave, 60 hertz. And the sensor you're using is it's a static field sensor. So it's ostensibly doesn't react to those kinds of fields. So that's what's exciting, because when you use the sensors that respond to fluctuating sine waves, you get a lot of false positives, right? Somebody could just be turning on the microwave in the basement and it would affect you. Somebody could be, broadcasting a signal on their walkie-talkie like 2 blocks away, and that could be setting it off. So with this type of sensor, that's much less of a possibility. So that's what's interesting. And then just in terms of the way in which it seemed to react to your requests, right? That's phenomenal. So one thing, again, from a people that aren't there, other scientists that are looking at this data, if you want to get into the reason why they would criticize it and maybe not see it as convincing, is one, like, what's the mechanism? We have no idea how this is happening, like I said before. But the other thing is, because there were humans, right, you two in the room as like the experimenters, what they could say is you're having an influence on the experiment without even realizing it, right? So for instance, something as subtle as after that third beep happened, you started laughing with like enjoyment, right? And it's like, oh, great, this is, it worked, right? So that could possibly be like, okay, we are now stopping the experiment, right? Like we're cutting it off here. We're not like listening anymore. Maybe like there was a little beep that you didn't hear because you were talking, which I don't think there was, but I'm just saying from the outside, those are criticisms that people can give in terms of like, there was just these external variables of you guys kind of pseudo unintentionally manipulating the data by just kind of cutting it there. And then, I'm not saying that's what happens, but like, that's why you have to add these formalizations to these experiments to get better, harder data that make it more convincing without that mechanism.
Right, and and that's why it's such a great thing for me to have you as a colleague here, where I'm not aware of that stuff, and I don't have that background, so I don't know the right things to do or the wrong things to do. And I have done my reading in parapsychology. I know a lot of the history behind that, and as far as using equipment, I'm not a scientist who is using scientific equipment and don't know how to correctly use that. And I'm willing to admit that. And it's great to have somebody who does know how to use that to explain it to me. So I'm learning a whole new way of investigating, and it's really kind of taken me to the next level, working with you and learning from you and listening to you talk. And then now the equipment that you're bringing to the table, I've been using, the standard digital voice recorders, EMF meters, like we just heard, flashlights, and just whatever you can grab your hands onto. We haven't had a lot of luck here at the Merchant's House with any kind of video or visual phenomena. People have experienced things. I don't even bring cameras here anymore. I'll take some snapshots just to document where things are. But
although we've seen some interesting stuff recently, we're still investigating, the degree to which they're interesting. But yeah, we've definitely seen some.
Right, because now Lee has been creating this equipment, and there is no equipment that has been made for ghost hunting. No matter what you buy on the internet or these spirit boxes, this stuff is not for ghost hunting, and it doesn't work for ghost hunting. It's cool, puts on a great show. I don't think there's any merit to it. But this now Lee has on his own been creating stuff. At first, it's sort of been tailored just for the Merchant's House, but these things, and I'm just seeing some of these things for the first time. they're amazing. And Lee, maybe could you describe some of the stuff that you, if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah. So one of the things is that might be a little bit of a misconception in terms of which types of sensor might be more desirable, because it's actually, from a scientific perspective, you can say it's actually more desirable to use off-the-shelf equipment if possible, right? Because that's something that it's standardized. It's made in a factory in wherever, and like a million of them are made. And if some other laboratory wants to get the same data you got, they can buy that same device and like replicate it, right? Meanwhile, if you're using
doing that with the E cameras,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So meanwhile, if you make your own sensor, great. If you have to make your own sensor, do it, because that's the only way you can collect the data. But the criticism is going to be, oh, who knows? You could have coded that however the heck you wanted to, and like maybe you made it bleep once a second at a random time or whatever. So that's a big disadvantage. So unless you sort of very formally, publish along with your data the schematic and like the code and everything, and you show somebody exactly how to make it, and they can make it themselves, that's actually a disadvantage to scientific investigation. So
how come?
Because for exactly that reason, in terms of like your design of that sensor is a new variable, right? They don't know who you are. They don't know how, if you're being tricky with it and like putting in some backdoor code or whatever. I have made some of my own sensors, but to the largest extent possible, I've actually been trying to use off-the-shelf sensors in new ways, right? So using them with the scientific method. So even that sensor that you were using, if you buy them and use them in the correct way, like you can absolutely use the scientific method, get convincing scientific data with that. So it's not necessarily always wanting, if you have to, yes, but it shouldn't be the goal to like always be making specific sensors for specific experiment.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but yeah, you explained that well. And I've got a question from Diane to you. She asked, but if you can always come up with some kind of explanation like Dr. Lee just had, how can you ever find real evidence of paranormal?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that's a question. Like I said, like you see a lot of people just getting frustrated because it's like, well, I came up with all these things, and there's always. So you always just have to ask that question, like, how could somebody explain this away, right? If you ask that enough times, you can build an experiment that's formalized enough that there is no other explanation, right? And so that's what I was saying, like what we're doing here, we're just constantly formalizing the experiments more and more, right? You can't just start off, it's very rare that you'll have a scientific question and then you're going to spend 2 years building the perfect experiment and set it down and then collect the data, and that doesn't end up being true, right? That's the thing about science. Like, it's not like engineering where, usually there's some way you can figure out a way to make things work. Science is observing reality, and reality is a certain way. And if it's not the way you think, too bad. Like you can spend, it doesn't matter how many years you spent building this perfect experiment. If it's not the way reality is, like you just wasted that many years. And that's incredibly frustrating, especially if you're trying to, get funding, to keep your job or whatever.
Right.
So that's actually a problem that's actually in the scientific community, the way science is done, which is that, you only publish positive studies in terms of when you get interesting results that sort of conform with your theory. And you need to publish those to get funding, to keep your job or to get promoted or whatever. So it's actually an advantage for this type of research or any type of research to not have that be your livelihood, right? Because when it is, there's that, again, the human bias. Like we're not robots. There's always subtle biases, whether they're positive, negative, they're always influencing these experiments. If there's some influence on that's not a good thing.
Right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's cool. That's all. I mean, see what I mean? This is it's great having Lee here because he keeps a lot of the stuff that paranormal investigators like myself who have been just kind of swimming along doing our thing, it really kind of puts us in check, and it makes us question our methods of how we've been doing things, and are there better ways to do it? And
sorry, I mean, I just realized like that I sort of avoided the answer to that question. So the short answer to that question, sort of the rule of thumb, is just eliminate humans as much as possible, right? If you can do the experiment with no humans interacting with it at all in like a sealed metal box and the experiment's happening in there, that's probably as good as you can get. So that's the general rule of thumb, just eliminate humans. And with all the ghost hunting shows, everything, there's always some person holding this sensor, swinging it around, having all kinds of effects on the experiment. So that's the main goal, kind of. And that's a lot of what we've been doing at the Merchant House too.
Right. And a real quick, Mary is asking, where can you study paranormal investigation techniques? All right, it's a great question. Go to the Rhine Research Institute. It's RHINE, Rhine Research, and you can find them on the internet. They have online classes. They have a great class specifically called Paranormal Investigation Techniques, and it's with Lloyd Auerbach, who's like he's a parapsychologist. He's the go-to guy for all the famous people on the ghost shows, all the Zacks on Ghost Adventurers, and guys like me and ghost hunters. All those guys wish they were Lloyd Auerbach, believe me. And I have gone to these events where people line up to get autographs from the ghost hunter guys, from Jason and Grant, and those guys are online to talk to Lloyd. They just want to get next to Lloyd and hear what he has to say. So he teaches a class there. They're affordable. They're online. I've taken plenty of them, and it's a great time. So great question, Mary, and definitely you should check that out.
One comment that I have about that is I would just say that's absolutely, so that's the best way to get sort of a good understanding of like what's out there, right? Like what data have people collected, what interesting questions there might be that you want to investigate, what types of sensors they might be using to capture this data. That's absolutely, valuable. But in terms of actually doing experiments, just study general science, right? Just understanding the general scientific method and then using that background, because partially what that question comes from is because parapsychological stuff is not necessarily published in these prominent journals, people coming from a traditional background don't have access to it. They don't even know what's existing, right? So that's an excellent way to sort of find out what's out there, what research has already been done, and choose your sort of research path. But in terms of how to actually do it, just general science.
Science, right. And also get out there. Read as much as you can and get out there. Since the explosion of all these shows, there's no shortage of ghost hunting groups out there. And, New York City, you could find, when I first started doing this in New York City, I couldn't find anybody that was doing this. There was only one group, Don Villela and Paranormal Investigations of New York City. And that was it. And I couldn't find anybody. I hooked up with him, and then the shows got very popular, and now there's ghost hunting groups everywhere. But the ghost hunting groups, they're pretty cool, and I'm sure if you asked if you could come along and you had an interest, they would more than likely just welcome you in and take you on a couple investigations, and you'll be able to kind of get your own groove going as well, and come up with different techniques or different experiments that I would be happy to glom off of you any day of the week. So great. So Mary, good luck with that. And you can send us an email. We'll send emails out to all the attendees that were here, and give us my email, and you can shoot me an email, and I'll try and answer you and point you in the right direction.
That question also kind of reminds me of when I first got started in this stuff. I mean, at least for me, one of the things I think people might have to get over is like the ridiculousness that you feel when you first start doing this.
Oh
my
God, yeah.
Like the first time when I first started getting into this, I'm like, I don't know, I'll go to a freaking cemetery with like one of these recorders, and I felt ridiculous doing it. But like, if you get over that after the first 15, 20 minutes, it's like, okay, I'm doing an experiment. This is how, so that's part of it. Joining a group helps too, because you're with other people that, you feel a little bit less ridiculous talking into the air with people next to you, right?
Right.
But yeah, that's part of it. And like you said, just kind of force yourself to get out there and just don't be afraid of feeling ridiculous. That's the way everybody feels when they're learning something new. And
I mean, when I was doing that, I didn't tell anybody I was doing this. And then, and I was always kind of kept it quiet that I was into this stuff, because you don't know what people are going to think if you're doing this. And then, I started letting my name get out there a little bit more. And then, around October, when all the Halloween stuff comes out, and everybody wants to do an interview with a ghost guy and a ghost hunter, and my picture was in the paper. So guys in the gym were like, is that you? And I'm like, yeah. But I would bring them here and let them experience something, because they would say, that's BS, right? And take them to the merchant's house. And I tell you, one of the things I like to do too, and just along those same lines you were just saying, how odd it is to do a paranormal investigation. I always like to bring somebody on an investigation. I always try and bring somebody who's never been on one. It's just a different energy. Sometimes I think the Treadwells get bored of me or tired of me, like I'm sure you guys are. You don't get to see Lee. You're just staring at me. But I like bringing in somebody who's never been on one, and just the kind of look on their face when you're asking questions to an empty room. And I always, you have to prod them. And I'm going to play a cool EVP. And this is sort of the EVP that got me cemented in here at the Merchant's House. It was recorded in the servants' quarters. I am up there with a group of people and a friend, Sarah, who had never been on one. I had a colleague whose name was Dan as well. And he is sort of introducing everybody to the room, and he is asking questions and kind of asking the spirit to interact with us. So I'm going to share my screen again quickly, and we're all good. And let's see here, make that small. And I'm going to play this. The first clip I'm going to play is the raw audio. It's not manipulated in any way. It's exactly the way it came out of the recorder onto my computer. And again, you'll hear Dan sort of do the introduction, and pay close attention to one of the first things he says.
If so, you don't have to be afraid. We're here just to find out if you're here, to communicate with you. And after that, we'll be leaving. So we'd love for you to be able to communicate with us. Again, you can rap, tap, knock, touch, do whatever you need, whatever you can to let us know you're here. Ask a question, Sarah.
Now you hear me say, "Ask a question, Sarah," and that's a Sarah whose eyes opened up immediately when I put her on the spot. But underneath that, you hear sort of a high-pitched little voice, and I'm going to play just from that part.
Ask a question, Sarah.
Before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And now I'm going to play it boosted up just a little bit. You will hear me. It's just the EVP, and you will hear the audio get louder as soon as in the section that I boosted up.
Ask a question, Sarah.
Not quite. There
we go. Ask a question, Sarah.
I am not afraid.
One more time.
Ask a question, Sarah. Ask a question, Sarah.
I am not afraid.
Now, anybody in the comments want to say what they think it says? Wait. Anyway, what I think it says, I am not afraid.
Yeah, and at least here, if you can hear it clearly, it's incredibly clear that that's what it says.
Right, and what's cool about that is the first thing that Dan said was, "There's no reason for you to be afraid," and we get this. I can't put an attitude on that voice, but it really does sort of sound defiant. What's interesting about this clip is a month earlier, we were up in the servants' quarters for the very first time. I had a psychic medium named Ray Shetty from New Jersey. He was there, and he was communicating with a little girl. He was trying to get her name. She wouldn't give her name, but he said, "I really do have the feeling, the sense that there is a little girl here in the room with us." So cut to a month later, we've got a little girl telling us that she is not afraid of us. Now this clip is, and like I said, it's the one that really cemented me here at the Merchant's House. I was up with members of the board in their conference room upstairs in their offices, and played this. And it's hard to hear without headphones, but I juiced it up as much as I could, and then I gave everybody a set of headphones, and we played it over the headphones, and it was just, mouths were on the floor, tongues were on the floor, and drawers were wide open, and I said, "All right, good. I think I did a good thing here," and here I am, coming on 14 years later now.
Yeah.
So
that's the kind of thing where me knowing you and knowing you don't mess around with this kind of stuff. For me, that's convincing enough evidence to be like, okay, there's something interesting here. Let's see if we can look into it. And there are ways to, there are things that scientists would say as to how that might have happened in a non-paranormal way. And there are also ways in which you could have collected that evidence that could have discounted those possibilities. And we can get into that in the next episode when we talk more about EVs. I don't want to kind of ruin that. But yeah, those are both topics that we can go more into next time.
Yeah, and you know, when I've done lectures, plenty of lectures here at the Merchant's House, and we you know, when I play these clips, people say, well, couldn't that be just somebody outside? And you know, there's a bar right across the street, and you know, it's quiet now with the pandemic, you know, happening. But you know, 10 years ago, it gets wild out there, and so you know, I always love to answer saying, yeah, it could be. It could be a voice, absolutely could be. And acoustically, there's all different kinds of ways where a voice like that could bounce all the way up into the servants' quarters. But I'll give you 10 reasons why I think it's not. But I can't say for sure that that's the spirit of a little girl up there. I can't say it for sure, and I certainly wouldn't until we do more exploration and can kind of get some data that really leaves no shadow of a doubt, which is why it's so great to have Lee here, and because like I said, he really can take this to the next level. And while you've just got, you know, a bonehead like me, you know, recording some voices in these rooms, which is fascinating and amazing, to have a scientist come in and put it through the rigors of science, and for him to then say, to sign off on something and say, okay, this is something significant. I can't explain how this happened. It's just, it's great for me. It's great for Lee. It's great for the house. It's just great for paranormal investigating in general. So, so we're very lucky. I'm very lucky. I don't think Lee realizes how lucky we are to have you. So, you know, thanks a million again.
I'll say the exact same thing. I mean, this is honestly, it's a scientist's dream too. I mean, if it wasn't such a controversial topic, that's the main thing that's keeping most scientists away from that. Right. Many scientists would be really excited to work on this. So this is a scientist's dream in terms of there is existing intriguing data suggesting the possibility of something, and now you have to kind of do more formalized experiments to you know, fully legitimize that in a scientific way. So like I was saying before, you know, usually scientists, if they have a certain hypothesis or they want to investigate something new, they start where you started, right? Like I said, they're not going to spend 2 years making an experiment to see if invisible people can talk into recorders, right? If you have no clue if that's even possible, right? So they start off doing what you did in a less formal way, and you get some intriguing data, and then you go from there. So the fact that you and, you know, other ghost hunters and stuff have been collecting this data, that's amazing. Just this huge cachet of very interesting data that you now can start formalizing theories around and formulate and actually invest the time to make these more formal experiments. That's sort of the perfect scenario for, you know, a jumping off point for this more formalized science, which again would normally have been done by the scientists themselves too. But the fact that that already exists and it's such a huge collection of data, that's an amazing opportunity. So, you know, likewise in terms of you know, working with you.
Thanks, Lee. And you know, it's the Merchant's House is as close to a sort of a closed environment you can get to. I mean, it's amazing for an investigator and I'm sure for a scientist like Lee that, you know, we're in a house, only one family lived here. We know the history of the house. We know the history of the family. We know when everybody was born, when everybody died. You know, you've got this great gem and beautiful. I wish you guys, we're going to do a show from different rooms of the house, so you guys will get to see good parts of the house during the course of the show. But we know everything about it, and the people that run the house, the board and the people that work here and spend their time here love this house and preserve this house, and it's just a gold mine for an investigator and for a scientist to be able to come in here and say, you know what, we got this name. Does this name mean anything to anybody here? And sure enough, you know, we can go back into the records and go, Annie McNulty was a servant here in the 1850s, and she came from this town in Ireland, and it's just so awesome as an investigator, and also you know, for somebody who likes to do investigations, to know you've got a home base. And when you're jonesing for an investigation, I can call up and say, hey man, I'd really like to get in the house this weekend, and boom, there I am, and I'm in the house. So I can't thank again the museum staff and the board for allowing us to come in here.
Yeah, and just the fact that it's such an enjoyable place to be too.
Yeah,
some,
it really
some haunted
is.
warehouse, it wouldn't be quite as fun.
It really is a special place. And I remember the first time I came in here, it really blew me away. I've been living in the city for so long, and didn't know that this place existed until I started researching haunted locations, and the Merchant's House just kept popping up. So. But back to that EVP, Lee. When a scientist hears that, when somebody comes up and says, "Hey, Lee, I caught this. What do you think of that? What's your first impression? And what are the first questions that go through your mind?"
Yeah, I kind of want to save that for the next episode.
Okay. All right.
There's a lot of, basically, I want to sum it up by saying, like, there definitely are questions, and then there are also definitely ways to address those questions, and just make them not applicable to the data, in terms of the way you collect it and the way you present the data. Right. So there are ways to devise the experiment to basically avoid any kind of possibility of something not paranormal.
Okay, cool. And in the upcoming shows, we'll focus on different parts of the things that we've been doing, and one of the reasons why we're doing this show is that when back in March of 2020, when the museum had to shut down because of the pandemic, it gave us an opportunity to the first thing we did was we set up those little consumer grade, those little cameras, just to see what would happen, in the house while nobody was here 24/7, and we were able to monitor on our smartphones, and
that's the other thing too. Just like the enhancement of technology and it getting cheaper is just making this kind of stuff, research, a lot easier.
Yeah. We threw in, like, how many cameras we have in here? I think we've got like 9 cameras in here. Which is crazy. We can log into them and watch what's going on in the house. But as the time went by, you started creating again this all this equipment that we were able to bring in. You were able to bring in and leave in the house.
Which is huge.
And nobody's interacting with it. Nobody's messing with it. It doesn't have to be moved because nobody was coming in here, unfortunately, for the house. But we collected some pretty remarkable things, and it seems that what we've been collecting has been almost amping up. We were catching little flashes of light on the cameras. Then we set up a touchpad. Where explain what happened there. That was cool.
So that was I brought in a specialized camera that could see in certain wavelengths of light that we'll describe on a future episode. And to run that camera, it has to be communicating with a computer. So I had just a touch screen computer that was basically just running an automated program that I wrote to automate the collection of data from this camera. And I would sometimes, when I logged in, I would notice that like the windows on the screen had been moved and shrunk and stuff. So and then one time I actually saw it happen while I was logged in. I actually saw like a window shrink, and I was like, what the heck's going on here? So we decided, okay, well, something interesting is happening. Let me just set up a little paint canvas on from one of the programs, and we started seeing some interesting patterns being drawn on it. So we're still investigating. We don't want to say necessarily what caused that, but it was definitely intriguing. And these touchscreens work via they're capacitive touchscreens, which is the same way your cell phone works. And it's possible that something unseen was interacting with the touchscreen. So we'll be showing that, I guess, maybe on a future show, and going into what might have caused that and what new experiments we're doing to learn more about that possibility.
All right, a couple of comments here. Mrs. Hovos, she said, after 6 years of living upstairs from a rather mouthy small child, that voice sounded to me like a pesky little boy. So yeah, we don't know. It was high pitched. I attributed it to a female, and that's why I say it certainly could have been a pesky little boy up there.
Kind of sounds like one of those paper boys in the old like black and white.
Oh yeah, sure, with the cat.
With the cat, exactly.
Yeah. And then another question, but couldn't a spirit presence be attached to the land? Hence my question above, did the family ever mention any phenomena? Not the family, the Treadwells As far as I know, and I'll ask around, but I haven't heard of the Treadwells reporting any kind of phenomena while they were here. There are journals and diaries of family members, and as far as I know, nothing's ever been mentioned. So a spirit presence being attached to the land, some kind of like a place memory type of haunting. Sure, that certainly could be possible. A place memory or residual haunting. The cool kids on TV talk about residual hauntings. A place memory haunting is energy that has been absorbed by the environment, and somehow that energy is released and people can perceive that energy. We don't know what the triggers are. We don't know what the conditions have to be, but it seems to happen. In this case, I don't think it's a place memory haunting, only because it seems to answer a question or respond to a statement that the investigator Dan said, "Don't be afraid." And then we have a little girl or a little boy, a pesky little boy, saying, "I am not afraid." So because of that, I thought it was more of an apparitional or intelligent type of haunting. It was responding to us. So, but good question. It's a good question.
Yeah. Well, so along those lines, I mean, one thing that's important to sort of always, when you're conducting scientific research, to always sort of pull back and look at your assumptions, right? And what they are and whether they're valid and whether they're based on hard data, right? So in terms of like what spirits are haunting a certain place, yeah, if you look at a lot of the data that ghost hunters have collected, a lot of times there does seem to be an association between like the location and like maybe the type of intelligence that may be activating sensors or whatever, like maybe at an insane asylum, you get EVPs of somebody screaming or something like that. Right. But yeah, you use that data, but you have to realize, well, that doesn't exclude the possibility that if these invisible beings do exist, they're not able to travel around, right? Yeah, maybe they have sort of a desire generally to kind of stay where they passed away or stay wherever they have a bigger connection to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to, right? So right. It could, maybe ghosts just hang out between buildings and they run around on the street all day. We have no idea. So
yeah, I mean, when we're talking about ghosts, we're talking about the survival of consciousness after bodily death.
Yeah, and if you're conscious, why not go around somewhere? There's no, like I said, we don't know the mechanism of this, so right. we shouldn't be already putting these rules as to like, exactly. This person must have died here. They must, who knows?
Right. When people talk about, investigating a graveyard, and I'm like, well, why would you do that? If you're a spirit, you could be anywhere just by thinking of being in that place. Yeah. Why would you hang out in the graveyard? Why would you stay at, where you had a car accident and passed away in a car accident? Why would you want to be around that? Yeah. I'm sure, there is some kind of emotional connection to that, and you may just kind of pop in and pop out. But again, these are all things that
they're all theories, and you have to start somewhere. But yeah, it's important to sort of be open-minded as to all the possibilities when you need to be. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And here we've got a comment from Jennifer. Dan, for the benefit of anyone who is new to the Merchant's House Museum ghost story, can you share one of your favorite stories from any time over the years? Yes, I can, but you know what, Jennifer, you're going to have to tune into another show because we're getting late here. It's been an hour, and somebody had asked in these comments if you could be on camera, but you can't be on camera just yet. So I apologize. You got to stare at my mug this whole time. Maybe we'll get a little dummy to sit next to me or something more interesting. But Jennifer, I'm sorry, you're going to have to tune in, and we'll definitely tell you lots of ghost stories. Maybe we'll have some guests be able to come in the future shows. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. Our next show will be the third week in May. We're not exactly sure what day yet. So an email blast will go out, and I'm sure there will be notifications everywhere on social media for the next show. We'll be dealing with electronic voice phenomena, and we'll play lots and lots of clips that we've caught here at the Merchant's House Museum. So Lee, it was really cool hanging with you at the Merchant's House. We're all by ourselves here too, by the way.
Yeah. Maybe not.
Maybe not. So tune in next month. Thanks for allowing us to be here, and keep supporting the Merchant's House Museum. Stay safe, get your shots, wear your mask. All right, everybody. Thanks, and
have a good night.
We'll see you next time.
All right.